All right, here we go. How's it going? I'm Marc Thomas. I'm the head of growth here at Powered by Search, and I just want to say welcome to today's live office hours. If you're joining us, you should definitely post a comment or a question in the live chat there. I have no idea if I pointed the right way or not then, so that'll be interesting. But definitely say hello. I can already see Jacob Miller there. Hey, Jacob. Jacob's from Headway. They make amazing videos on YouTube as well if you're interested in product development at all. So definitely check them out. I'm going to go now. Oh, sorry. I'm going to introduce today Dev, who is our CEO at Powered by Search. How's it going, Dev?
It's going real well. It's a good Friday over here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. The weather is so changeable though. I'm in Wales and it's boiling hot and sunny. 1 second, it just hailed. There's a hailstorm as well, so who knows?
Yeah, we had a big storm come in through Toronto. We had some lovely days of summery type weather, and now it's kind of cold and dreary. So it actually reminds me of your side of the pond. But hey, that's what it is for today.
That's it. All right. Cool. Should we get started? Let's have some questions. So I have the first question here. The first question is from John. John asks, what are your favorite non-standard ways to generate leads? Now, we obviously do a whole bunch of lead gen at Powered by Search and help people to do that. And so it's kind of interesting here to see what the what people are saying. How do you feel about that?
That's a great question. I think that if you're thinking about alternative forms of lead gen, like the question really is like where are some of the blue oceans in lead generation rather than the hotly contested the red oceans of PPC or trying to rank for short tail terms that are really competitive from an organic search standpoint. And so you start looking at like where people congregate. So we have this framework of like who people follow, where they frequent, and what they fund, and so where they spend money, basically. And a good place to start this, especially in B2B, is start looking at Q&A websites. So one of the overlooked opportunities we see a lot is there's really not enough participation on two places. Quora, for if you're trying to market B2B SaaS specifically to business users, it's a great place to jump in, to do research, to answer questions over there. And then ideally, you give a little bit of a snippet of an answer, and then you link back to a blog post if you have one on your website. That's a great place. The second is Reddit. I see too many marketers who are shy of contributing to Reddit because they think they're going to get flamed out. And it's a very contentious social platform. I love Reddit,
Hmm.
but I'm more of a lurker over there personally. We have had success in both running Reddit ads as well as participating on Reddit communities. You actually do need to participate. You can't just kind of drop a post and then run away. You will get flamed for that. And the third is if you have SaaS that focuses on technical users, developers, data scientists, that type of thing, Stack Overflow is a great place. So basically, just finding conversations that are already happening. If you don't know how to find these right now, Google's your friend, but there's also websites like BoardReader where you can go in and effectively search forums where conversations are happening. And that's something that, like, just because it's not a scalable way of lead gen, a lot of marketers tend to ignore that, which is an opportunity for you from a non-standard lead gen perspective. So that's just one of the ideas.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've been enjoying recently is using SparkToro. So SparkToro is obviously not a lead gen tool. It's not going to give you any leads. But what it will tell you is where they hang out and what they're interested in, and it'll give you a good kind of overview there of what your audience is interested in. So you can add in, say, a social account that a lot of people you are interested in will follow, and it'll tell you then what other kind of social accounts people are looking at. One way that I do this personally is whenever I have a lead who I'm talking to, I'll ask them, like, what do you listen to? What podcasts are you listening to? What websites do you visit? Like, where do you go to read when you've got to solve a problem? And it's really cool because then you can pull that stuff out and then
Mm-hmm.
find out where you need to go to capture leads in future.
And to that point, and I love what you shared over there. We're talking a little bit about the educate and motivate section of getting leads to know you, like you, and trust you. There's another component as well, which is to get to entertain them. And so, if you really want to go on the far side of unconventional lead generation, start looking at ways to entertain your leads as well. That could be a public Spotify playlist that you put together. If you understand sort of, again, where people are frequenting in your audience, what they like, you could put together, I think HubSpot did this at some point, maybe even Moz did, where they created a public MozCon playlist. I might be entirely making that up, but I vaguely recall that might be true. Other things, start looking, and this is becoming more of a trend right now, look at other people's side projects that are taking off and now becoming quite big. There's an app called Proof, which does these little notifications. They're essentially social proof for micro conversion. So if somebody downloaded an ebook, or so and so Mark just purchased an ebook 6 minutes ago from Cardiff, let's say. I'm sure you've seen those. So they started actually submitting some of their in-office photography onto Unsplash. And then if you went to Unsplash and you started looking for office photography or people working in the office or something like that for your presentation decks, you could then download a royalty-free image from Proof, and you would know that it's Proof because they've got like Proof logos and stickers in the background, right? And so just like these are fun little things that if you've got some extra time, would be kind of good from a non-standard lead gen perspective. I think that being said, don't ignore the standard obvious stuff. Occam's razor, the simplest way of doing things or the simplest explanation to getting to an end result is the right one. You don't want to get into a trap of activity which keeps you busy but doesn't really achieve as much. So I think like our whole philosophy is work from that bottom of the funnel, people who are looking for what you do and how you help first, and then move towards the awareness stages of these little pockets of the internet where you could essentially end up getting in front of the right person, but they're not going to be as much volume. So we would consider them like additional opportunities as opposed to the go-to place. Even if you're in a competitive market, like figure out how to compete, not how to ignore and then go somewhere else.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. The one of my principles for thinking about marketing in general is first do what works. Um, it's so easy to kind of get carried away with thinking of like all the cool viral loops and stuff that you could build into your product or you could build into your marketing and stuff. And that stuff is all really good for the point where your marketing's already converting well. But actually going in and saying, okay, here's the basic stuff that I need to do, as you said, Dev, is just a really strong start.
For sure. And then because it's non-standard, like there's a limit to what we know as well. So if you're watching right now, whether you're watching live or you're watching a replay after, drop it into the chat and let us know what your favorite non-standard lead generation, either strategy or tactic, maybe a website might look like. I think that way the community just, helps each other out. And you might learn something, and we might learn something, frankly, that we want to go check out as well. So, I mean, if you're watching right now, drop that into the chat.
100%. All right, let's take our second question here. Let's go for Azar asks, how do you beat a competitor who bids more than you do for ads? I'm going to let you start that one off, Dev.
All right. Okay. So, um, this is a standard sort of David versus Goliath type of situation, right? Your competitor is bidding more. I think they're bidding more for two reasons typically. If you were to look at a pattern, either they just are much more well-funded, or they could be a little bit silly and they think that there's certain fallacies they believe in. Like perhaps they think that ad position really matters and being top of page matters, so therefore they're willing to bid more. We start seeing this in SMB markets a lot, where the ego of having the best position often, takes up market prices entirely. So if you're in that situation, one of the maxims that we follow is different is better than better. And so how could you have your ad stand out in a way where really are that kind of proverbial purple elephant, right? Or purple cow, I guess, in this situation where you use the same type of language that your customers use to be able to get a click-through rate on your ad that's a standard deviation higher than what the competitors are basically getting. So if you can't beat them at the sort of the game that they're playing, which is bidding up higher, beat them with creativity, and that's specifically writing ads and creating ad creative that is very different and stands out, even if you have a lower ad position. That's true on the Google search network or on the Bing search network as well. The same principle applies in paid social channels like a Facebook, for example, or on LinkedIn. Just being able to stand out in the newsfeed and to stand out in a way which gets a much higher resonance in terms of the click-through rate. That's sort of one way you can beat somebody who's got a higher bid. The other things that you can actually end up doing as well beyond that would be, let's kind of think through that. You could start bidding on, again, the not on the red oceans, but on the blue oceans. So start going more long tail, for example, send people to content rather than to really high threat offers, like directly to a demo or a trial. We see SaaS companies making this mistake a lot, where they try to sell a product, whether it's a free trial or a demo, which is both of them are high threat, high consideration type of call to actions, immediately off an ad. And then if the purchase cycle is one where people will continue coming back, meaning they don't just convert on the first time that they click. This is especially true if you're trying to sell something that's over $1,000 a year on the very low end. So imagine one of those $99 a year type products, all the way up to something that's $15,000, $25,000, $50,000 a year. If that's the case, you don't typically just sign up for something like that on your first visit. So it's often actually, it's a different path, but a better path to be able to send those people to content and then remarket to them after, versus trying to bid on the most obvious keyword that everybody's going after. And that ends up getting the highest bids basically as well.
Yeah, I've just got from Brian. Brian, here we go. One trick that I've learned is to mimic the content of the top organic results. Google has already determined what people click on more often. I really, I love it. I love that approach. And I'm totally, Slidebean had done this with a lot of success. Slidebean, I don't even really know what they do other than they're great at marketing, because that's all I know them for. I'm not 100% what they even do, but they took their marketing budget and basically invested it into Google Ads and said, well, we'll just see what is converting for us, and then we'll take that and we'll basically create organic pages and rank for those things before we actually go off and try anything else. And they found that they were completely dominating these search results that were actually high converting for them.
Yeah. Brian, I think you're onto something over there. And Mark, thanks for the example around Slidebean. I think if you guys Google how SEO and PPC work together and maybe add the word SaaS in there, you'll find our post and our method of doing exactly the same thing. We use PPC to kind of validate the different use cases and get conversions that way. They're obviously higher cost. And then we go, do we have a content page that should rank for these keywords around these search queries? And if not, then that goes over to our SEO team and we start creating some content around that. One cool thing actually that we discovered about this is if you Google the keyword best, the keyword search pattern best X software, to Brian's point, when someone's Googling that, Google will show you their tea leaves if you can read the search results. And an example of what you'll see is a bunch of directories rank. You might see some of your competitors rank over there as well. But what you won't see is a single website's homepage typically rank, which is really interesting, because what that keyword pattern is basically showing is that people want to know, they want to have choice and selection between a peer group of different competing SaaS platforms versus choosing the one best platform. So that's especially true for somebody who's looking for best CRM software, best small business pipeline management software or something like that. And you'll start noticing those trends. So, a lot of us, I think from an SEO standpoint, start thinking about how can our homepage, for example, rank for those keywords. And so if you didn't do what Brian just recommended, you'd be barking up the wrong tree and wasting a lot of time building links to a homepage that would have never ranked in that for that SERP anyways, because Google's already determined that these internal pages that offer variety to users are the ones that match closely with search intent.
Nice. Well, if you're just joining us, we're talking about, we're not talking about that. We're talking about how do you beat a competitor who bids more for ads. And Dev just said there's a nice blog post. I mean, we have a lot of blog posts on kind of the topic of paid advertising because it's kind of what we do. But one recent one as well that I just want to give a shout out to here is about using Twitter ads for B2B SaaS and the kind of the untapped opportunities that there are around that. Let me just share this with that Courtney has just added in as well. Courtney says what Brian said. So Brian was saying that one trick that he's learned is to mimic the content of top organic results on Google. So Courtney's saying that also taking popular book or chapter titles from the most popular digital and print media on the subject you're targeting can be a game changer in content marketing. Now I asked Courtney for an example and Courtney's not got back to me yet. What do you think about that, Dev?
Well, I love that because if you start thinking about your content strategy, one of the things that I know is true about that is, the standard way of writing content, it looks something like you Google your keywords, you see what content's ranking, you effectively end up regurgitating and making a slightly better mousetrap of that said content. And if you're only like, 10, 20, 30% better, you may have a chance at ranking for that term or that topic for a period of time until someone else just comes by and outcompetes you. So what I love about what Courtney shared was that the idea of topic mapping and the interrelation or connection between topics is something you can just study from books. So if you're thinking about the way that information is laid out, the book has gone through so many more cycles of revisions and edits and typesetting and everything else that typically would not happen on an online blog. If you think about the publishing cycle, is just so much shorter for a blog versus a blog post versus that for a chapter, even for a book. And so learning from something that's already in print and therefore the finality of having a physical copy of the book is a really great way of then reverse engineering what should be on your blog post as well, or what the flow of the information should look like.
It's this is good. This is good. I'm enjoying this. Okay, I just want to take a minute here to talk to you about something else that we're doing. So we're obviously doing these office hours, and we'll be doing these once a month. It'll be the last Friday of the month generally. So keep on sending us your questions. There's a type form link in the description to this video. You can always send us a question there. But one other thing that we've just started doing is we've got a podcast. Now, if you are enjoying my voice even a little bit, you will love our podcast because you're interested in SaaS marketing and you're also liking my voice. It turns out a lot of people, particularly in North America, likes my voice, and I narrate each week the best of the marketing knowledge that we have on SaaS topics. So far we've had Twitter ads, which I just mentioned up there. We've also had SaaS homepage design and the classic mistakes that people make and how to avoid doing those yourself. So tune in. You can find SaaS Marketing Bites on any podcasting platform. If you don't find it on one, you gotta let me know. You can message me at Marc, that's Marc with a C, at poweredbysearch.com. Okay, let's move on to our next question. And that question is from Omar. Omar asks, how should we think about content depth for a SaaS product site? Content depth is super relevant. Especially at the moment, a lot of people have cottoned on to the idea of content depth. I'd be really interested here, Dev, what your kind of your top line thoughts are about that.
Yeah, Great. It's a great question, and often a missed opportunity for many SaaS websites. So if you think about the way that most websites are put together, the first version of a product page, right, is usually pretty quickly put together. And we actually have an article about this where we talked about the perfect way of breaking down SaaS product pages as well. We talk about it, and there's like this distinction between a shallow product page, a deep product page, and a dedicated product feature page. And the idea is, we've all been on those sites where there's like a section for either how it works or a product, and then every single feature, or at least most of the major features, are all there. And you know what I'm talking about. There's like a little bit of a screenshot on the right-hand side, and then a paragraph of text. If that, it might even be just a heading and a couple of lines, or maybe a couple of bullet points. And we see that that from a content depth perspective just doesn't do it doesn't do justice to what the customer should expect when they move into using the product. And I would say that demo-led companies are probably a bit more guilty about this than product-led companies, because they can only sell through an online-based conversion cycle. There's no salespeople, obviously, to talk to. So as a result of that, I think from a content depth perspective, you should start thinking about it from this manner. Think about all the questions that come up in customer success tickets, all the questions that come up in a demo, and endeavor to cover those topics on your product pages. So that would be sort of one way of understanding, sort of, have you cornered and answered all the questions that do come up from people who intend on being customers or who are customers. And so this idea of like working with the end in mind and working backwards to your marketing pages is something that we haven't heard much about within sort of the SaaS marketing world. Folks who are experts in this space. But we like it a lot because it just means that there's no guessing around as to what customers might want. We can actually just go straight to the source of what they do want and what they say, and we can extract from their conversations the things that matter to them, and then mirror that and flesh it out, and add content depth to product pages over there. So that's one thing that you can do. The second thing is we see sort of mistakes around is typically product or feature pages tend to be written for a one-size-fits-all audience. And what I mean by that is it's usually they're usually written as, this product feature can help you do X. And we have this theory that there's only three things being sold in SaaS at any given time. You're either selling speed, so you're basically moving things from manual to automated. You're selling certainty, which is moving from a risk-prone environment to a risk-free environment. Think of it like workflow software where there's human error, people forget to do things. If there's a step-by-step approach that the SaaS platform has, it's selling certainty. And the last one is selling insight, where you might have a ton of data and you want to make some sense of that data. So you want to sell insight, which is not just data points, but like a story or a narrative. BI software like Databox, for example, or Tableau, that's kind of what they're selling over there. So if you know what each one of those, what that lead thing is that your B2B SaaS platform sells, you can actually figure out who to map that feature to and who cares about it most. So we have these three avatars that we think about as well: check signers, managers, and daily users. Daily users spend all their time in the software every day. So if you're HubSpot CRM, most CRM systems that are used by salespeople, the salespeople care about it being fast and not being a drag on their day. So you would ideally want to have content depth, either terminology or paragraphs or testimonials from other salespeople to demonstrate to the salesperson who's reading this page, arguably, that it's an easy to use platform and it saves them time because they're buying speed, right? Now, if you try to address all of those three different things, speed, certainty, and insight on the same page, not everybody in an organization cares about those things equally. As an example, check signers may not be using the platform on a day-to-day basis at all. All they're doing is making a capital investment or an expense, depending on the way you look at it, into a platform and hoping for good things. They want insight. They want to know that. That's why executives like dashboards a lot. Being able to understand that, hey, on a dashboard, I can see that my productivity for my sales reps and teams have gone up. Managers care about certainty. They have to take an existing system or a process or a workflow and maintain it and then improve it incrementally over time. So they need reassurance from the platform. And so the features that you map around your content depth should speak to that, giving them an in-depth view in terms of how you actually do that. And I think the number one problem we see a lot is just that the content on these product pages tends to be way too shallow. And so it doesn't cover any of those angles in that depth. And that's why you end up having low engagement, high bounce rates, and so on. Did that make sense on some level, Mark?
Absolutely. I think from my perspective, one of the things that I see most frequently is people chase search volume. So they chase the volume of the keyword that they're actually going for, rather than the actual conversion and mapping it to the buyer process, as you said, Dev. I think it's really, really important that you actually think, hey, what does a person who has been sent this link by somebody in their organization need to know in order to participate in the buying cycle? And chasing search volume is one of the fastest ways to get your content marketing wrong. You can do it, and it's great for certain things. However, if you actually ask an executive what it is that they're looking for when they're thinking about buying a product, you'll always get these answers that are so far from the thing that your content marketing probably is already doing. They're things like how can I avoid reputational risk by using this new product, and things like that. Now you want to think about content depth in two ways. The first way is to think, okay, what does the buying cycle need to get this into use in the organization? What content do they need? That's kind of sales enablement content, and the search volume on those things is often barely anything at all. It's really high pain point stuff, but not pain point for the end user. It's pain point for the finance department, or pain point for the decision maker. And then the second way that you want to think about it is building trust overall throughout your site. So one of the signals that Google uses is basically around trust. Is this a trustworthy source? So when you're ranking any page, regardless of whether you're doing this for a SaaS business or not, although that's what we think about all the time, you want to think about, okay, how can I be more authoritative? So how can I cover this in a way that is genuinely useful to the whole cycle, but also to a person who just wants to learn right now? And as search becomes a bigger and bigger channel for businesses, it becomes more and more important that you actually think about how you can develop a moat around your content for yourself, for your brand. And so thinking about content depth in that way is also something that you should do. Cool. Do you have anything else you want to say about that, Dev?
No, man, I think we covered the topic pretty well over there. And thanks for the question.
Yeah, nice one, Omar. All right. Number 4, let's go to that one. This is an interesting one for me. So, Michelle asks, with the emergence of social audio like Twitter Spaces and Clubhouse, do you think audio will play a role in content marketing moving forward? So what I love about this question is actually we don't talk a lot about kind of social. We think about social from a PPC perspective, for sure. But we're not really in the market of organic social. So it's really interesting to talk about this from that. What do you think, Dev?
Yeah, so you know what? I think that there's a dichotomy in how you think about this and how you measure it. There's a difference between brand marketing versus direct response marketing. And since what we find with the clients that we serve, they are not hitting their pipeline targets often when they come to us because they're thinking tactically rather than holistically. They don't have the right strategy in place. I mean, they aren't even doing the obvious things necessarily to be able to tap into direct response intent. Meaning like the intent to buy and use and to basically pay for software platforms that they have. They're often on the brand side, you can't measure it quite the same way. Now, I won't tell you that we've been part of Clubhouse conversations where we haven't quite architected the room, but being invited in as a panelist or a participant And we've seen it in our own analytics, a deal that came through that was a 6-figure deal for us, and it came through Clubhouse as one of the referring source. Cool, that's great. We love that ended up happening. I think overall, what you'll end up finding is that the cool thing about platforms like Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces is the distribution's kind of inbuilt. And so if you're doing things like what we're doing right now on YouTube Live, one of the reasons why we picked YouTube Live versus Clubhouse, because you might be thinking about why we made that decision, is we think about producing great content once and then distributing it forever. And so part of that is taking video content and stripping out audio, taking the audio content and turning it into text, taking all of those pieces of content and turning it into sort of micro-sized, bite-sized content as well. And so kind of giving this idea that we all learn differently and we consume content differently, and there's no one right answer. Meaning, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't watch a lot of videos on YouTube. That's my personal preference in terms of consumption cycle. But if you're a content creator rather than a content consumer, it does make sense to start thinking about how can you capture all this great content that you have that you're drawing from your experience essentially, and record or document it in some way, and then transform it into a different way that you can then disseminate on other channels, essentially, right? So the distribution rules everything around me. Think about that as kind of an adage. That's essentially what we want to do over here. I think Twitter Spaces actually is pretty darn cool. I don't have an invite to it yet. We're going to be doing a Twitter Spaces soon, aren't we, Mark?
That's right. We're doing that on Wednesday, and oh my gosh, you just pushed me on the time here, Dev. I tell you what, sign up to our email newsletter and on our website, and I'll drop you a note about it. But that'll be about product-led marketing versus freemium. Are those the same things or not? We'll be joined by Ramley John and hopefully Wes Bush at Product-Led Institute for that. As well as a whole bunch of people who you probably already follow on Twitter. So
yeah, and thanks to Camille Rexton from 42 Agency for hosting it. He was able to get into Twitter Spaces, and and he's promised not to say a word, by the way, other than just to be the host of it, because he has some strong opinions on product-led marketing or product-led growth in general. So back to sort of the are these channels useful? 100% they're useful. I think the transient nature of not being able to record the conversations makes it difficult to be able to capture it. I know that one of my friends who's now he's quite a bit of Clubhouse stuff. He's a SaaS coach in the space, Dan Martell, he's recording conversations that he's having on Clubhouse. Like he's got a recording set up where now that can be repurposed into other channels, for example, as well. We're just dipping our toes into the organic conversations, primarily, again, because of this idea that we have not tapped every other more obvious channel that is in front of us, like a YouTube, for example. That's why we're doing this right now and being of service to the community and just hanging out with you guys, right? I think once we have our footing over here and we've got, instead of being spread too thin, we'll start venturing out into Twitter Spaces and into Clubhouse, for example, as well. And I don't think that those channels will ever allow you to record, because that's part of their kind of unique selling point is the live conversation, like almost like a social gathering or a party, and trying to recreate that. I can tell you from a user's experience, it's a bit jarring to open up the Clubhouse app. I don't know if you guys have it and you've seen the 100,000 notifications that they send you. I have notifications disabled on my phone, so I never see it. But you jump in, you're like, I don't really know how to get into a conversation. So unless you're planning an event and then launching it for a great conversation, like the one that Elon Musk, I think, had with, who was it with? Was it the CEO of Robinhood? I can't remember right now.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so stuff like that is epic. But for the average, conversation that ends up happening on something like Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces, it's hard. The discoverability element of it is the nut to crack, which is hard right now. The distribution is built in. And that's the upside of being on those platforms.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, Dev, just going back to what you said right at the start of that answer there, one of the things that I've definitely thought a lot about is the power of sort of brand on these. I think that's really the thing that is good. that's the main benefit of taking part in something like Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces. I know that I just took a couple of weeks ago. I took part in Corey Haynes's Clubhouse, and I was making a risotto or something at the same time. And halfway through, I had to leave because I had to go and eat my dinner. And I spoke for like 3-4 minutes total. And yeah, I picked up probably about 20 new followers just from that 3 minutes. And the way that I think about brand is I think about increasing the number of touch points that a person could have. And really the conversion that you're looking for when you're at that point is you're looking for dominating someone's attention in the nicest possible way, you know. And Clubhouse and Twitter provide an opportunity for you to capture attention of new audiences in a way that I think other platforms have not really. Dev, we've got two more quick questions here, or kind of two more points. The first one I want to bring up is from Andreas. Sorry, 2 seconds here. Andreas says, to what extent do you have differentiated thoughts or strategies for B2B when it comes to freelancers, that's one-person companies, where the end user is also the check writer? Sorry for the small type there.
Andreas, I love the shirt you're wearing over there. It's blue and colorful. So good on you for that. Okay, so let's think about this. Going back to this idea of starting with the end in mind, if you were to talk to one of these one-person shops that are doing everything, right? What would that conversation sound like if you were to do a customer interview? And then we kind of think about it from the perspective of if you had a pie chart of their time, where are they spending most of their time? There's no doubt that it's fragmented because they're trying to wear so many hats at the same time. But if you were to ask them the question, like, tell me, in a given week, what do you do? Like, just give me a sense of what that looks like for you. And they're starting to go through and say, well, I'm marketing and I'm selling and I'm delivering and, I'm paying the bills and I'm thinking about taxes and I'm thinking about everything that is required to run a business at the end of the day. The follow-up question could be, which of those things is the most painful for you right now and why? And so you let them talk through that. And then you say, and what do you wish you could be doing instead? Right. So if we're doing some customer development work, what do you wish you could be doing? And they'll tell you if they want to spend more time on automating things, on creating certainty, because they're just dropping the ball and they're trying to keep everything, their entire to-do list is in their head on some level. Or they may have it in an app of some kind, but they're just not following through. They may actually use a project management tool or a to-do management app, and still they're not getting done, right? At the end of the week. So they're still just as frustrated and anxious at the end of the week. Or is it insight? Like they may already have a successful business, but because they're so focused on working in the business that they can't derive insight on actually what's working, because they just can't be working on the business. So I think customer development will give you those answers. And primarily what we want to do is reflect their pain points in your content. And so the idea here is if you can articulate their problem better than they can, like the stuff that's on the tip of their tongue, if they start seeing that in your copy and your messaging, they'll prescribe trust on you because you've done the research, you get them, they feel understood. And so it's actually not that different from the way that you might approach this for a multi avatar type of organization. It's just that the same functions that started with a solopreneur, they have now delegated out to other people. And those other people have, daily responsibilities, managerial responsibilities, and check signing kind of future value creating responsibilities, right? In this case, all of that's happening in one person and they're quite fragmented. So being able to create tension between the pain points they have, the cost of inaction of not solving those pain points, and then drawing out success stories of the pain points you've solved for your existing customers. That's all you need to do to be able to show them that there's a better way moving forward.
Yeah, just to kind of speak a little bit to what Dev said there about the identification of with your potential customers. One tip that I have here, which I've used a lot recently, is I actually review recordings of sales calls on an app called Grain. So Grain records, or will record your Zoom calls for you. Obviously, let your prospects know that you're doing it. And I actually pull out key language that people have used. I have a document that I keep, and it's a voice of customer thing, and I highlight the kind of the most interesting pieces of language, and I use those directly in landing pages or sales documents and things for Powered by Search. Um, Andreas says a follow up would be, here we go. Let me put this on. A follow up would be noting your praise for performing customer interviews. Are you guys fans of the book and methodology buyer personas? Sounds like I maybe just actually answered that question. I've not read that book myself, but I pretty much live by it.
Yeah, it's the same. I'm not familiar with that. Our kind of where we drew inspiration from this is the jobs to be done method, which was popularized by a guy called Clay Christensen. He used to be a Harvard professor. He unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. And his partner, Bob Muesta, who's a friend of mine, runs a group. Man, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but he's basically done work with Basecamp, and I think he's invented or either helped the product creation process of 300 plus products. Great guy. So he's got a book called Demand Side Sales, which I would encourage you guys to check out. It's a great way of thinking about, rather than viewing selling, including your copy, is kind of doing that, right? It's essentially selling one to many versus one to one. Viewing it from a buyer's point of view, in this case, a buyer persona or the avatar, versus a seller's point of view, which is where most of the content, the marketing, the decks that you see in your businesses are seen from how do we convince somebody to choose us and how do we compel them to do so, versus the buyer really is they're stuck in some way and they're seeking progress, and they can articulate where they're stuck and what kind of progress they're trying to make. And this book does a really good job of breaking down how to think about all your selling activities in the buyer's language, rather than what we revert to most commonly, which is a seller's perspective on how to sell.
That's cool. Andreas has said Adele Ravella wrote that book, Buyer Personas. Right, one more question. We've got something from Courtney here. So Courtney says, I've personally found time restrictions to be the hardest part of taking full advantage of content juicing. I love that, content juicing. Nice one, Courtney. Has anyone found a way of organizing your schedule to make time for things like this? Let me take that one, actually, because I think about it a lot. So yes, Courtney, a couple of things here that I think about. So the first thing that I would say is that you want to think about the highest leverage opportunity you can to create content. What I mean by that is that if I'm thinking, hey, I've got a great idea for a blog post, the thing that's going to take me a lot of time if I want to repurpose that blog post is turning it into a video, and then turning it into a podcast, and then turning it into, a slideshow or whatever. But if I flip that around and I say, well, look, I want to talk about this specific idea. This is an idea that's valuable to my customers or clients. I can create a video, because then I get visual, I get audio, I get the text, which I transcribe using an app like Descript, which takes me minutes. If you're not using it already, it's wonderful. It's how I create a lot of content for Powered by Search. And basically, you go for the most difficult thing to produce, which is video, and you work down to probably the easiest thing, which is actually, I think, audio myself. You can pull out different bits from that and thematically work off it. I know somebody who will take a podcast episode, hand the title of the episode to a freelance writer, and have that writer basically just knock out a blog post thematically related to the podcast, and that becomes part of their content lifecycle. The other thing you can do is you can pay someone to do it for you. There are services like what is it, Daily Content Machine? Dev, what's the one that you've tried out before?
Repurposehouse.co or .io, I think, where they'll basically take video content and turn that into social media posts. Like, so imagine like word quote posts essentially, or snippets of video that you can then, reuse in paid social ads and on Twitter and a bunch of other places. But totally aligned with what, Mark is saying over here, which is go eat the frog of the hardest thing to do, the highest fidelity format that you can create the content in, and then repurpose that into the lowest fidelity but highest frequency type of content. So, for example, a tweet would be, low fidelity. I mean, it's just a couple of words of text, but then you can continue reusing it basically as well. So, if you really want to amp or juice the strategy even more, you can start thinking about how to take your wittiest tweets and starting to repurpose them over time. So you're not just creating net new content. Again, on that topic of distribution rules, everything around me, you can use something like Hype Fury or just a couple of other social media tools as well, where the idea is once you've identified high engagement content, you just keep basically, the idea is when you publish it, just imagine that if you have 10 people that you need to see it that are part of your ideal customer profile, at any given time, only one or two will actually see it. The other 8 on 10 are not on the platform at that time. They're busy. They're on vacation. There's all this life basically is happening, right? And so as a result of that, if you keep repurposing your content and sending it out, two things end up happening. One, you get to reach more of your ideal customer profile. The second thing that ends up happening is the people who are on the fence and are maybe late adopters or late movers, they just keep hearing the same topics. And so a common telltale way of seeing this is you take sort of the OG content producer, Gary Vaynerchuk, and you look at some of the themes that Gary talks about. They're effectively the same 3 to 5 themes that you'll see in any of his content that gets chopped up into multiple different micro pieces of content. But the themes are very, very consistent, and so that consistency then creates a community basically who is magnetically attracted to that same thoughts and the same thoughts and beliefs and so on. And so start with the eating the frog first, and then start thinking about a system to trying to go from video to audio to text to snippets of content and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I joined Powered by Search like less than a month ago actually, and a great first month. But
Another first month.
we've been thinking a lot about content and how we get in front of people in a more kind of constructive but also saturated way. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is actually kind of codifying how I think about content distribution and repurposing. So over the next few weeks, I'll be writing down a system for taking a piece of content that we've produced, whatever format that has been in, and taking that and saying, okay, well, here's all the different things we're going to do. These are the networks we're going to share it on. And then from that kind of plan, I'll take a more practical thing and work out, okay, are there bits of this that I can either automate or using something like Zapier, or are there things that I can automate using, say, a spreadsheet? Like if I'm writing the copy for a status message once, how many times can I take that and slightly change it in the same spreadsheet so that I've got effectively a template for sharing content? And the second thing that I'll just say there, Courtney, before I stop talking here, is that one of the concerns that a lot of people have about repurposing content and then distributing it, and Ross Simmons, who talks about distribution rules everything around me all the time, one of his kind of main messages is basically, don't worry, people won't get tired of it. And I think that's really key because, as Dev said, people are busy. The reality is most people won't see your content the first time you send it out or the fifth time, The reality is you have to keep sharing stuff with people in a way that is both helpful to them, but also helpful to you. And I would just definitely say that before I stop talking. Dev, you want to add anything?
Uh, Great points, man, and stellar first month, as I just mentioned. The one thing that I might add to that is you have to remember who your content is in service to, and that your peers in the industry, other marketers, people who offer similar services or expertise as you do, are not your customers. And so if you do tend to repurpose your content and your peer, some friend of yours says, man, I just don't like seeing your repeated content being reposted in my feed anymore. Take that advice with a grain of salt because it was never intended for them in the first place, right? Like you're not trying to preach to the people who already know. You're trying to invite people into your point of view who don't know and could be using your help. And so whether that's you as a B2B SaaS platform or as a practitioner or as somebody offering services, consulting, expertise in the industry, just remember that like our peers are not our customers most of the time. And while their input is amazing and you want to build community and whatnot, if you start repurposing content, you just say, hey man, like just mute these keywords, right? I'll tell you which ones we repurpose, and I don't want to bog down your newsfeed or anything like that, but it's not meant for you, bottom line. And so that hopefully that gives you some encouragement to like go through and actually try it rather than kind of go, I don't want to offend anybody and be a bother, because you can be helpful and be helped by your community at the same time and the people that you seek to serve.
All right. Thanks, Dev. So we're coming to the end here. We might have time for a couple more questions, quick fire ones, but if you've got a question, put it in instantly, or if not sooner, because otherwise we'll close it off. But I just want to give another plug here for SaaS Marketing Bites. SaaS Marketing Bites is our new podcast. It is once a week. It's voiced over by me, so you'll get to hear me a lot. But I share the best SaaS marketing knowledge that we have on various topics. So we've done Twitter ads, we've done homepage design and classic mistakes that people are making, and it's about 15 minutes tops, and it's very digestible, if I do say so myself. You should subscribe. It's SaaS Marketing Bites it's on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, it's on Spotify. You can probably get it at your local drugstore even. It's everywhere. So definitely subscribe and keep an eye out for new shows, not just new episodes, but we'll be putting out a couple of new shows this year, all around SaaS marketing and the stories and the people behind it. It doesn't look like there are any more questions there. Dev, you want to? Whoa, that's not what I wanted to do. You wanted to say anything before we leave?
I just say that for the podcast, we're trying some new things basically over here, including this. So if you've enjoyed this, please share this with a friend. There's a lot of stuff that we're sharing super open book over here, and hopefully you got some value out of this. If you did, share it with a colleague, and let's all create better marketing together. And if you like the podcast, leave us a review, and that way more people can find it as well. Otherwise, we will be seeing you on another one of these real soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Dev. See you soon. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.